Ben and I started living together after getting engaged. He even invited his mother to live with us without consulting me and treated me like a servant. One day, I was involved in a traffic accident and rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. The doctor said I might have a permanent disability in my leg. To make matters worse, the perpetrator fled the scene and remains missing. Instead of showing concern, Ben and his mother hurled cruel words at me. I'm going to marry a decent wife. I'll break off the engagement with someone who needs care, a defective product. She's not a match for Ben. A defective product should just disappear, crushed by their heartless words. I was too shocked to respond and just watched them leave the room, laughing. Okay, abandoning me in such a state. Breaking off the engagement was unbearable enough, but to think there was someone else he wanted to marry, another woman, and dump me. How much more can he insult me? A boiling anger surged from the depths of my stomach, heating my entire body. Remember this, I won't let this go. I am Tracy Manning, a 45-year-old housewife. I've been engaged to Ben, who is 2 years younger than me, for a year now. I met Ben through my best friend Rachel. He likes sports and dining out, and was a fun person. Being not very articulate myself, I've always been drawn to people who are the opposite of me. When I mentioned losing my parents in an accident in middle school, I found out Ben also lost his father around the same time, and we bonded over this unexpected common ground. Our relationship progressed with the intent to marry, and upon Ben's proposal, we began living together in my house. However, living together revealed Ben's true nature. He was a former soccer player, a large man with a huge appetite. I love tasty food, but since I'm a light eater, I used to enjoy watching Ben's hearty eating when we dined out. Seeing him happily polish off a large steak or pasta was truly satisfying to watch. However, Ben had a disposition that made him unsatisfied unless he'd ate large amounts of food at home as well. Of course, knowing about Ben's big appetite, I was initially happy to prepare plenty of side dishes for him. I worked full-time and often came home later than him due to overtime, but when I returned exhausted, the pot was empty. My dinner had disappeared from the fridge, leaving only shredded cabbage. Ben, did you eat my share too? He puffed up his cheeks unhappily as he watched a soccer game. Yeah, I took it. Mine was too little. I was dumbfounded. 2 beef steaks, a soup full of ingredients, a heap of Caesar salad, and 2 plates of mashed potatoes still weren't enough for him. I swallowed my complaints and reluctantly bought my own dinner at a store. Similar incidents happened several more times, but I disliked confrontations and just prepared another meal instead. In retrospect, perhaps it was wrong of me to accept his behavior without showing my anger. Eventually, Ben's overeating began despite it being just the 2 of us living together. Even if I prepared meals enough for 4 or 5 people, by the time I got home, everything would be eaten. If that wasn't enough, he would eat the cup noodles, frozen food, and even the frozen side dishes I set aside for my lunchbox. Even when I left notes saying, I have plans for these, please don't eat them, he would ignore them. Furthermore, Ben's overindulgence didn't stop even when we ate together. He would reach over with his fork to snatch meat or fish from my plate. When I protested, he would look at me as if he were confused. You don't eat much, so I'm doing you a favor. It would be a waste if it went uneaten, right? I was just about to eat that. Check with me first, I'd say. Sorry. He laughed it off and apologized. But at the next meal, he did the same thing again. Ben had always lived at home and couldn't cook at all. On the other hand, I had been living alone since moving out of my aunt and uncle's house when I graduated from college, so I was in charge of everything from planning meals to shopping and cooking. While I could cook more food considering the preparation and storage in the fridge, There was a limit to how much I could make at once. Naturally, during a health checkup 6 months into our living together, Ben was diagnosed as overweight and with high blood sugar. When I cautioned him to eat less, Ben puffed out his chest. A man should be big. It looks more imposing. Women need to be slim, though. What is that supposed to mean? I was baffled, and Ben smirked and said, "You know, Tracy, it would be embarrassing if you got any fatter. I'll eat for you." Excuse me, I'm actually of average weight. Before I could finish speaking, Ben reached over and scooped up a large portion of a limited edition pudding from a popular store, stuffing it into his mouth before I could stop him. "This pudding is really good. Buy some more, will you?" It's a hassle to queue up, so Tracy, please do it. Without showing any remorse, he left the table with a full smile. As I held back my irritation, his mother called, "Tracy, what time will you be coming home tomorrow?" Me, probably after 7:00 p.m. Wondering why she asked that, I vented about what had just happened. Then his mother scolded me. "Ben happily eats your terrible cooking. How dare you complain?" But lately, he's been eating all the side dishes. He even rates the food I store at home. When I gently protested, she retorted fiercely, "Ben works hard, so let him eat plenty. You're barely working a decent job anyway," she yelled in a piercing voice and hung up the phone. I sighed and ended the call. As our cohabitation period extended, Ben's arrogance only grew worse. Initially, Ben helped with other household chores besides cooking, but after 6 months, he stopped doing them altogether. "Ben, when I come home late, please bring in the laundry as we agreed before. I'd also like you to clean the bathroom." Ben, lounging on the sofa and fiddling with his phone, replied without looking up, "I'm beat. When I get home from work, I'm hungry too. You should handle that stuff. I'm tired too." We decided this from the start. Ben frowned deeply, cutting off my words. "Stop nagging. I work at a major company and earn more than you do. Besides, you're a woman, you should be able to juggle housework and your job. Everyone else does." Ben would ignore me for days if he got upset. It was always me who had to apologize to end the fights. If I was already feeling uncertain about living with Ben, and another troubling issue arose unexpectedly, my mother-in-law moved in without warning. "I'm home, what?" I was speechless when I entered the living room. Large boxes were piled up in the corner. On the sofa, my mother-in-law sat beside Ben, watching TV and laughing carelessly. My mother-in-law had occasionally popped by before. She came to see Ben, not me. It was unusual to see her car in the parking lot on a weekday. But what was this about? "Oh, Tracy, welcome home. Please make dinner quickly. I'm hungry." "Mother, you're here, Ben." A moment, I beckoned Ben into the hallway and asked, "What's with the boxes?" It should be obvious. These are my mom's moving boxes from today. We'll be living together, so please be nice. This is so sudden, it's troubling. She raised her voice. "At least you could have discussed it with me first." Ben frowned unhappily as he responded, "It's fine. We were going to live together once we got married anyway, so I had her come over earlier." Hearing our conversation, my mother-in-law, who had just arrived, chimed in. "He's the eldest son. It's common sense. Why do you need your permission?" Ben nodded in agreement with his arms crossed, and I felt utterly disheartened. Once the two of them teamed up against me, there was no winning. That's when the hellish days began. My mother-in-law, as if it were natural, did not do any household chores, and would have me make her coffee, which she would then complain about being too lukewarm or too weak every time. Moreover, she seemed to be bad at cleaning up after herself, leaving empty snack bags and beer cans around, and leaving cardboard boxes from her online shopping orders unattended. She didn't even throw away her trash, so I found myself cleaning up after her all the time despite imposing on us. She didn't pay for groceries or utilities and constantly complained. "Tracy, I heard you told Ben to do the household chores. He's tired from work. Let him relax at home." I work full-time too. I think it's common for working couples to share household duties. When I finally stood up for myself, my mother-in-law's eyes narrowed angrily. "Who do you think you are? Don't act so high and mighty when you earn less than Ben." "That's right, if you want to have an opinion, earn more than me first." With my mother-in-law as a strong ally, Ben's arrogance only increased as we approached the first anniversary of our cohabitation. I regretted not waiting longer to live together before booking the wedding venue, but it was already too late. When he proposed, I was so thrilled that we immediately started visiting wedding venues and hastily booked one. I can hardly imagine having a happy married life with Ben and his mother now. When I introduced Ben to my foster parents, my aunt and uncle, they were as happy as if their own daughter was getting married. If he works at that company, that's reassuring. Ben is such a bright and nice guy. It's daunting to tell my aunt and uncle the truth, but I don't want to miserably resign myself to this situation. I've decided to call off the engagement and cancel the wedding. Just as I made up my mind, I was involved in a traffic accident. Someone called my name, and when I opened my heavy eyelids, I found myself inside an ambulance. An EMT peered into my face. "Can you tell me your name?" Yes, Tracy Manning, as I spoke. A sharp pain shot through my right cheek, and I couldn't feel my right leg. I could tell it was bent in a strange direction, but I couldn't move it. "We'll be at the hospital soon." I was too groggy to grasp the situation. I should have been asleep in my bed last night, but I woke up in an ambulance. How did this happen? I had completely forgotten that I had gotten up, prepared for work, and ridden my scooter to work. After being rushed to the emergency room and having a CT scan, it was clear I had hit the right side of my head, but thanks to the helmet, there was no damage to my brain. The doctor said my memory confusion should resolve over time. The damage to my leg, however, was severe, with a fracture that would heal in about 2 months, but serious ligament damage. After the surgery on my leg, and once the anesthesia wore off, the doctor came to explain the situation. "Full recovery of your right leg will be difficult," the doctor spoke solemnly. "It is likely that walking on your own will be difficult in the future." As the doctor spoke, everything around me seemed to darken. "Will I be disabled?" I asked in a trembling voice. "Yes, you will likely need to use a wheelchair." Suddenly, the world seemed to lose its color. I stared at my right leg, which was suspended and wrapped in bandages. "By the way, the police have been waiting for a while now. Are you able to speak with them?" "Yes, well, what is it?" "The perpetrator fled the scene, so they're here to pass on that information." Turning to look at the police officers waiting by the door, the doctor then left the room. The 2 officers who came and briefly explained the situation according to witnesses at the scene. "It seems a car with a beginner's mark struck you from the right after hitting. You, the driver, a young woman, just drove away. I see. We will report back as soon as the perpetrator is identified. Take care." After the police left, I cried quietly. Why did this have to happen to me? Did I do something wrong? All I wanted was to work, get married, and be happy. I wanted to cry face down, but it was hard to do so with my legs suspended. Fortunately, there were no vacancies in the general ward, so I was placed in a private room. While sobbing, someone opened the door without knocking. Before the surgery, a nurse had asked if I should contact my family, so I sent messages to my aunt and uncle, a colleague from work, and even Ben to explain my situation. My aunt, uncle, and colleague, who had arrived before the surgery, looked like they were about to cry at the sight of me. I wondered if Ben and his normally cold mother might show some sympathy when faced with my condition. However, my faint hopes were soon shattered. Pointing at my tear-streaked face, Ben burst into laughter. What a hideous face. You were already ugly, but now you're swollen up like a monster. Ben, that's not nice. Tracy is in pain. Even my mother-in-law, who tried to scold him, couldn't help but burst out laughing. So when are you getting out? Hurry up and come back to cook for us. Exactly, that's the only thing you're good for. I felt a surge of anger at their insensitive attitude. I am injured, aren't there better things to say? It looks like I'll be in the hospital for about 2 months. For now, we need to cancel the wedding venue. Who's going to take care of us? I continued facing my mother-in-law's discontent. Also, it looks like I might end up with a disability in my leg. The doctor said I might need to live in a wheelchair. Ben and his mother exchanged glances suddenly, as if remembering something. Ben spoke up, but we'll get a hefty insurance payout from the perpetrator, right? With that money, we can remodel the house and make a killing on the compensation. So even if you can't work, it might be okay. You'll get money even if you don't work. That's great, Tracy. About that, as I hesitated, and then revealed that the perpetrator had fled, they both looked disappointed. Then you're useless, mother-in-law, Ben said. Break up with her. It's a waste to be with such a burden, yeah, really. Their appalling remarks were quickly echoed by Ben. Looking at my mother-in-law, he delivered a shocking line. Mom, I'm actually going to marry Samantha. I kept her around because she cooks well, but I should have dumped her sooner. See, I was right all along. With a triumphant smile, my mother-in-law turned her mean-spirited grin towards me. Then we'll marry another young lady, someone younger, prettier, and more obedient than you. All we have to do is change the name of the bride. There's no problem with the wedding next week. While grinning, Ben looked down at me as I lay in the hospital bed. I'm going to marry a decent wife. I'll break off the engagement with someone who needs care, a defective product. She's not a match for Ben. A defective product should just disappear, crushed by their heartless words. I was too shocked to respond and just watched them leave the room, laughing. Okay, as the silence returned to the hospital room, I stared blankly at the ceiling, vividly recalling Ben and his mother's actions. Although engaged to me, Ben was also seriously involved with Samantha, planning to marry her. As I calmed down, a boiling anger surged from within, heating my entire body. To abandon me in this condition and break off our engagement was unforgivable, let alone that he had someone else he considered his main interest. How much more could he demean me? Remember this, Ben, I will not let this go. Hanging my leg and confined to the hospital room made the day incredibly tough. Thanks to strong painkillers, I could bear the physical pain, but being unable to move freely was very stressful. The daytime was still manageable. I could distract myself by watching TV or browsing comics and videos on my phone. The problem was at bedtime. Unable to move my body, it took a long time to fall asleep, and when I did, I was tormented by nightmares. In the darkness, I tried to run from a ghost, but couldn't move my legs, so I'd crawl away using my arms. Soon, the ghost would catch up and almost attack me before I would wake up, startled, my heart racing, and drenched in sweat. Breathing heavily, I would realize it was just a dream. Trying to sleep again was difficult, and I ended up just idly staring at my phone until morning after having nightmares 2 nights in a row. I talked to a nurse who gave me sleeping pills. Many patients apparently struggle with insomnia due to discomfort and the unfamiliar environment. Following the nurse's advice to take the sleeping pills, I was able to sleep soundly until morning, which relieved some of my distress. While I suffered, Ben was presumably enjoying his new married life. The thought disgusted me, but each time I reminded myself, soon Ben would come begging back. I would have the satisfaction of turning him away. 3 days after the accident, while I was lowering my dinner tray and absent-mindedly looking at my phone, Ben called. Ignoring his initial calls, he kept calling persistently, so reluctantly I answered. "Yes, hey, what's going on?" Ben blurted out without introducing himself. Knowing the reason, I coldly asked, "What do you want?" "A realtor came and told me to leave the house this week," Ben complained. "And why did you sell my car without asking?" "What I do with my own house and car is my business, right?" Hearing this, Ben whined pitifully. "I was planning to move Samantha into that house, and now you're kicking me out all of a sudden." "That's crazy," I sharply dismissed him. "That house was built by my aunt and uncle as a graduation gift. When I started living alone, I planned to keep living there. But if I'm going to be in a wheelchair, it needs major remodeling." "I guess so." Ben finally understands and agrees. "Just because the house is too big, I thought about putting it up for sale and moving to a single-story house." "That's fine, but why are you kicking us out?" Surprised by the question, I couldn't help but yell, "Because you're strangers." "Obviously, we're not strangers, we're ex-Biancas," Ben retorted. "Ah, you're hesitating to call Samantha because you think you'd be in the way." Ben starts talking nonsense. "I don't mind at all. It's a big 3-story house, so you can live on the first floor, Samantha and I on the second, and Mom on the third. That's how we can divide it up, right?" Overwhelmed by the absurdity, I pressed my temples and took a deep breath. "After all, it was you who forcefully proceeded with the idea of living with your mother, wasn't it?" Feeling my irritation swell, I tried to speak calmly. "Even the car, if you barely use it, I'll use it instead. You said and took it for a spin on your own. Don't you think that's presumptuous?" Then Ben suddenly fell silent. After a moment, he muttered softly, "Mom thinks that she bought the car and the house. You should just tell her the truth. What's the point of putting on hairs as a family?" As I spoke with mixed astonishment, Ben was taken aback. However, being naturally persistent, he pressed on further. "Hey, please spare me from selling it. Mom likes it here, and if we move, she wants a rental of the same level. It's impossible to find one in a few days. If you're willing to pay a rent of $1,000, I might consider lending it to you." At my suggestion, Ben raised his voice in anger. "Huh, you must be joking." "Such a cold woman," he cursed. "Fine, I'll figure it out myself," Ben said irritably, and then hung up the phone. It was around the time when I was allowed to move to a wheelchair with the help of a nurse and got permission to enter the lounge and store. Ben and his mother came for their second visit. I assumed they would be disheartened after being kicked out of the house, but surprisingly they were lively. "Hey, poor man, the swelling on your face has gone down a bit, hasn't it?" Still an ugly face, though. As the two of them teased me, I felt like I was dealing with kindergartners. "Have you finished moving, or are you still living in a hotel?" I honestly didn't care, but I asked anyway, and his mother's face lit up. Ben has a high income, so he found a wonderful apartment quickly. "A new apartment on the 15th floor. The night view is beautiful," she replied excitedly. "That's good to hear," I replied monotonously, and Ben spread a vulgar smile and teased me. "With those legs, you must be out of a job, right? If the perpetrator isn't found, you'll have to pay all the hospital and outpatient fees yourself. If you keep going to the hospital without getting better, it's going to cost a lot." Though I wanted to retort that the high-cost medical system reduces the personal burden, it was too much hassle, so I kept quiet. And his mother's voice became cheerful. "You've always had bad behavior. It's all your own doing. A defective product should just cling to disability benefits and live poor forever." I'm enjoying newlywed life with Samantha. Unlike you, she's obedient to Mom. Even if I eat a lot, she doesn't make a face. She's such a good daughter-in-law. I'm looking forward to grandchildren. If you have no business here, could you please leave? I said wearily, and both his mother and Ben were outraged. We came to visit you, and you're still as unpleasant as ever. That arrogant attitude of yours is your flaw. That's why I broke off our engagement. Without bringing any sweets, they showered me with sarcasm while supposedly visiting me. What kind of visit was that? Just as I was thinking about kicking them out of the hospital room, I heard a knock, and the nurse appeared, looking a bit surprised. Miss Manning, you have a visitor. May I let them in? Wondering who it could be, I nodded to allow them into the room, and a timid-looking young woman in her early 20s appeared behind the nurse. Seeing me with my right leg fixed with a splint in bandages, and my face bearing scars on the right side, she immediately teared up. Oh, what have I done? As soon as she approached the bed, she broke down in tears. Ben and his mother looked at the woman with a puzzled expression. Excuse me, are you the person who was driving during the accident? I asked hesitantly, and the woman, while crying, nodded her head. Yes, I am the perpetrator. The woman stood up and introduced herself between sobs. When I caused the accident, my mind went blank, and I fled. But since then, I've hardly been able to eat or sleep. She spoke through her tears. My mother was very worried about me staying in my room without eating, so when I told her what happened, she scolded me through tears. I wanted to apologize in person before turning myself in, so I came here. The perpetrator knelt on the floor and bowed deeply at the foot of the bed. Raising her voice, she said, I am so sorry for what I've done. Seeing the perpetrator shaking, I replied with a calm voice, Thank you for coming forward. I had thought I would unleash my anger when I faced the perpetrator, but when the time came, the words wouldn't come. Of course, I felt resentment for being left in such a state and felt anger, but seeing her genuine remorse, I couldn't bring myself to berate her. She bowed and then left the room. Ben spoke with a disgusted look. What a bore. She's been hiding all this time, and you would have had to pay out of her own pocket if it continued. Ben, the chance of catching a hit-and-run offender is 52%. Apparently, arrests often come from eyewitness reports like license plates. His mother's explanation made Ben's eyes widen. So she would have been caught sooner or later, huh? That's right. Also, apart from compensation, you'll receive the hospital allowance, won't you? You're the beneficiary of the life insurance, after all. Indeed, I had completely forgotten, but I had changed the insurance beneficiary to my fiancé, Ben, when we moved in together. I never thought he would be like this. You can't change the beneficiary when receiving it, so if Tracy processes the insurance claim, it all goes to you, Ben. With a slight grin, his mother handed me a large envelope from the insurance company. You must be bored during your hospital stay, right? You should read this again, Tracy. Thanks. I lucked out with such a generous ex-Bianca. After the cheerful pair left, I looked down at the life insurance documents and chuckled to myself. The following weekend, while chatting with Rachel over bottled tea, the hospital room door suddenly opened. Tracy, you did it, didn't you? Ben flew in with an enraged expression, clutching his cell phone. Hey, a friend is visiting, please. Can this wait? Shut up. Look at this. Rachel and I exchanged glances before peering into the cell phone screen. There was a lengthy, angry message from Samantha. Ben, you were engaged to me, but you were also engaged to Tracy. I can't believe you even lived together. Ah, no, it was Tracy who kept pressuring me, and I just. Ben replied in a flustered manner. The mansion you showed me before was Tracy's house, wasn't it? And the story about living in an apartment because it's being remodeled was a lie too. You big liar. Sorry, Samantha. Please forgive me and smile. I can't trust you or your mother anymore. Ben's apology only added fuel to the fire, and Samantha became even more heated. By the way, who told you all this? That doesn't matter. Also, did you decide to marry me because I'm a nurse, because you thought I'd willingly take care of your mother in the future? Even that information, Ben's confusion was evident from his response. It was true then. I'm not going to be some care worker from now on. That's why I'm divorcing you. I'll stamp the divorce papers and send them, so please submit them to the city office. Wait, I really love you, Samantha. I don't want to break up. The conversation ended there. Ben, showing me the signed divorce papers, yelled at me with a furious expression. It must be your doing. You play dirty. Are you that jealous of my happiness? It was Rachel who burst out laughing, not me. After laughing heartily for a while and wiping the tears from her eyes, she looked at Ben with disdain. I was skeptical when Tracy consulted me, but Ben, you really have a terrible personality. If I had known, I wouldn't have introduced her to you. Ben snapped at Rachel too. It's none of your business. I have something to discuss with Tracy. Just go home. I'm the one who told Samantha. Ben gasped after hearing the details from Tracy. The date of the ceremony and the traits of the spouse matched one of my subordinates. When I checked, it turned out to be true. Rachel stared at Ben with a stern look. It's infuriating to see a valued subordinate made unhappy. So after consulting with Tracy, I revealed everything to her. Surprised by Ben's reaction, I spoke sharply. Samantha is the daughter of a friend of your mother, right? Hasn't she been swallowing all this consideration for her mother and your mother's relationship until now? It's good that she could make a decision quickly. Ben's face twisted in frustration. His neck turned red as he shouted angrily at me. Since when did you have the right to lecture me with your defects? You're just a social burden relying on disability benefits. Rachel blinked in surprise, shrugged, and looked at me curiously, not noticing. Ben's continuing insults. An elite like me got engaged to a plain woman whose only skill is cooking. You should be grateful for the happy times you spent with me. And yet after all the complaints, you ruined someone else's happiness. Want to get sued, huh? Rachel looked at me with a resigned expression. Ben, don't you know about Tracy's background? I mentioned that my family is involved in the medical field, but if I told the real story, it seemed like Ben and his mother would start asking for money. Ah, that makes sense. Both of you, stop your annoying chatter. As Ben was berating us, there was a knock, and the door to the hospital room opened. A dignified man in a suit entered with a polite greeting. I apologize for my late introduction. I have just returned today from a conference in Germany. Yes, I heard about it. It's been a while, Director. As we exchanged greetings, Ben erupted in anger. I was still talking, old man. You should quiet down a bit. Your yelling is audible all the way to the nurse's station through the open door. Chastised in a commanding tone, Ben was at a loss for words. The director glared at him sharply and continued. You've been saying to Miss Manning are unbearable. Do you even know who she is? She's my ex-fiancé, so I can say whatever I want. It's none of your business. The man frowned at Ben's insolent attitude and sighed deeply. If you have a complaint, say it clearly. Don't you know Miss Manning is the chairperson of this hospital? Ben seemed confused for a moment. After a brief pause, he burst into laughter. What are you misunderstanding? She's not a doctor, just a hospital staff member. Even if she's not a doctor, one can become a board member with the governor's approval. The director's words made me smile broadly. Right, I hadn't told Ben, but I inherited the land for the hospital chain from my parents. It's worth about $29 million in total. Ben's mouth agape, Rachel delivered the final blow. Tracy even declined the VIP private room offered to her because she didn't want to show favoritism. Didn't she? Of course, such rooms should be kept available for seriously ill patients. The director beamed with pride. As expected, Miss Manning, that's why the board members respect you so much. Ben, stunned for a while, came to his senses and looked embarrassed. As we were enjoying the conversation, he tried to sneak out of the room, but stopped when his phone rang. "Mom, I'm coming home now." Ben blinked rapidly and suddenly turned pale. As we watched him curiously, he asked me quickly, "Tracy, when will the life insurance be deposited?" "It won't be." "I stopped the process since Ben is the beneficiary," I said. Ben let out a groan of despair and collapsed on the spot. "What happened?" I asked. "My mom charged $50,000 on my card for shopping," he muttered in a fading voice. "She went on a shopping spree for brand goods. She planned to repay it with the life insurance." I laughed in disbelief at such a thing she would do. Then Ben looked up at me with a sly smile. "Hey, Tracy, if you have $29 million in assets, you can pay off our debt quickly, right?" As a favor since we were engaged. I was stunned. After all, he had used me and mocked me as a poor defective person. And now he dares to say this. "You have some nerve." I held back an angry Rachel and smiled kindly at Ben. "That's tough, but you're an elite employee, so you should be able to pay off that much debt quickly. Unlike me, a defective, you can work hard so you'll be fine. There's no need for me to help." Ben looked at me with a grimace, unable to retort, and left the room with a slouch, a changed man. The next day, Ben was called by his department head at work and severely reprimanded. Ben's client had proposed canceling a contract. The client had visited the hospital to see a friend the previous day and overheard Ben's abusive rant towards me in the hallway. Disillusioned because the voice was unmistakably BS, they were disappointed. It was a major contract, so the loss was significant, and Ben was demoted and relocated to a regional office as a result. His colleagues treated him coldly after learning the reason for his transfer, and Ben, feeling reckless, quit the company. He now works multiple part-time jobs to pay off the enormous debt his mother created. His mother stayed after arguing with Ben over the debt. With Ben's salary reduced, they couldn't afford the condo's management fees and moved to a shabby apartment. Being poor at keeping things tidy, their room quickly turned into a garbage dump, making them the butt of neighborhood jokes. After driving out Ben and his mother, I had planned to sell the house and move to a single-story home. However, as my leg was healing, I canceled the house sale and decided to continue living there as before. My leg, expected to remain impaired, recovered enough to walk after 3 years of rigorous walking training. Running or squatting causes pain, and long walks are challenging, but I cherish the ability to shop and travel without relying on a cane or wheelchair. The perpetrator of the accident that led to my injuries was arrested for negligent driving causing death, but received a suspended sentence due to visible remorse and opted for a non-prosecution settlement. They surrendered their license and are now living a reformed life. I also received compensation for the broken engagement through a lawyer from Ben. Although I have plenty of money, I insist on collecting it as a matter of principle. Samantha divorced him, and after falling out with his mother, Ben felt lonely and sent me selfish messages like Tracy was the best after all, and let's start over, which I blocked. Getting engaged and cohabiting with such a peculiar person was a complete waste of time. However, through this ordeal, I grew closer to Rachel, and being hospitalized helped me see the strengths and weaknesses of the hospital I oversee. I relayed these findings to the board members, striving to reflect them in my work.